Good morning or afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to 7 Myths and Realities about TRID. We're glad to have you for our webinar, and we're especially to have our special guest with us, Bill Kidwell. And many of you are familiar with Bill, and that's why we had him as a guest on this webinar. But about half the audience isn't familiar with Bill. Bill has been an originator for years. He was the 2006 Colorado Mortgage Broker of the Year. He's an active originator. He's also the founder of IMAG. He has a product called MLO Compliance, and one of the reasons why we have him talking about TRID compliance on this webinar is because his product, along with what we do here at Pipeline ROI when it comes to marketing and growth, his product with compliance fits with that. So you might want to check both of those out. As far as at Pipeline ROI, we're a marketing and workflow solution for mortgage brokers, real estate agents, and brokers. And then IMAG with MLO compliance, their tagline is making competing and compliance compatible. And so I think that's something that would be worth your time checking out. So again, thank you for being here. We think this is going to be worth your time this morning. I want to ask you a couple poll questions before we get started. As we have entered into this time of TRID, people have had lots of questions. So a couple questions. First of all, when it comes to your marketing, if you could answer these real quick. How confident are you about your knowledge of TRID guidelines and how they relate to your marketing? If you'll answer one of those, that'll just kind of give us an idea of where everybody sits today. Lots of voting happening. It looks like a little over half have voted, so we'll wait. So how confident are you about your knowledge of TRID guidelines and how they relate to your marketing? Okay, I'm going to give you just a few seconds left. Not everyone has voted, but if you're going to vote, now would be the time. Okay, I'm going to close that and let's share the results here. Okay, somewhat confident. So we're kind of in the middle. Okay. Let's see here. And the second question is this. And I'm asking this question: how confident are you that the leads that you buy are in compliance with all federal regulations? The reason why we're asking this question is because we encounter a lot of mortgage brokers that are tempted to buy leads. And one of the things that both Pipeline ROI and Bill that we're trying to work on is that through relationships and just through really good organic and relational marketing that you can generate leads. And our hope is that you can slow down on buying leads, especially if they're non-compliant. So how confident are you that the leads you buy are compliant with all federal regulations? So go ahead and vote. Okay, looks like about half of you have voted, but voting has slowed down. So that tells me that if you are voting, you have voted. So let me close that and share that result. Okay, so we have a little less confidence as far as that they're in compliance. So I think we can agree that we have a need that we want to make sure that we're in compliance on our leads, and that most likely the best leads we can get would be ones that are coming to us organically, and the ones that are coming to us that we're not buying. So our hope for you is today in this webinar that you're going to get some information that is going to help with that. That's going to save you some time. That's the time that you do invest is going to save you some money, and that you're going to be more in compliance, and that you're going to be able to compete better, and that you're going to be able to grow. So that's why, as Pipeline ROI, we're hosting this webinar today with Bill. So with that, I want to turn it over to Bill. I'm going to give him the slides here, and he has. Bill, do you have the slide controls now?
I think so. Let me just check. Yes, it looks like I do.
Okay. Before you start, Bill, let me tell the audience, if you have a question, you should see a question pane in your dashboard. Put your questions in there, and we'll collect them. And we have allowed plenty of time at the end. We've made sure our content is short enough so that we can get to people's questions. We know that this, and we've also limited the number of seats in the webinar so that we can have a good Q&A in this. And let me answer one. There was a question about dinging noise, or is it just my PC? I would recommend that you try logging back on, because we're not hearing that on our end. But put your question in the question pane, and at the end we'll make sure and answer them. All right, Bill, it's all yours. Thank you again, Bill. Thank you for sharing your industry knowledge, and specifically how you and your relationships with real estate agents, how you are helping them grow their business.
David, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with the group, and I'm hoping that when we get into this, everyone on board kind of understands why this TRID presentation is structured a little bit, well, not a little bit, but a lot differently than I suspect most of the TRID presentations that you've seen. I'm going to start with something that actually comes out of the poll that David did. I found it interesting that on the poll for knowledge of TRID, there was absolutely 0% response that said that people were either quite or very confident in their knowledge of TRID. And I think that's an interesting kind of a way to segue into what we're going to be talking about today, because TRID in and of itself is a challenge. I was talking to David right before we started, and he asked me if I am an active originator, and he asked me if I've done any TRID loans yet, and in fact, I false started one on Saturday the 3rd, and as it turns out, it didn't move forward, but yesterday I was provided with the closing disclosure and settlement statement from one of my subscribers, who has closed several loans under TRID in the few weeks that we've had it. And it was interesting. I'm an old ex-money center bank controller as well as being an originator, and it took me 45 minutes to reconcile the differences between the closing disclosure and the settlement document in an Arizona loan. I think we're all going to be faced with some interesting challenges, but it's those challenges, I think, that make this presentation worthwhile. David was kind enough to allow me about 45 minutes to get through this. I'm hoping I'll be able to get through significantly quicker than that, so that we'll have time if anybody has any questions. But when you think about it, the subject of TRID was initially covered by the CFPB in 1,880 pages of double-spaced type that got shrunk down to only 637 pages when it found its way to officially being published in the Federal Register. I'm really guessing that most of us didn't have a chance to get through either one of those novels and get prepared. And obviously in 45 minutes or 35 minutes, I'm not going to be able to spend time talking about the operational significance of TRID. So instead of talking about the operational stuff, what I want to really try to start this thing with is an idea that, come on, I don't know why we're getting latency here. There we go. Is that if we look at this through the right colored glasses, we can probably turn TILA-RESPA integrated disclosures into an acronym that stands for turning resistance into deals. And what I want to share with you is that the presentation that you're going to be going through today, up just short of a video I'm going to share with you at the end, this presentation was given on October the 5th here in Denver, Colorado, to a collection of people who were here representing an organization called Elite Realtor Network. Elite Realtor Network is a group of some of the top producing real estate professionals in the country. And they were gathered together to do what they do as a mastermind group, to share ideas and thoughts. And I was invited to speak to that because I'm trying to get people to understand that TRID in and of itself actually can represent an opportunity, particularly for those of us who are originators and who recognize the importance of partnerships and prospective partnerships with our realtor community and real estate professional community. After I'm through with what we're going through, I'm going to focus all this on 7 myths and realities, or what I believe to be the realities that are associated with TRID that have really created a lot of resistance in everybody's mind. And that covers originators, it covers real estate, title, lenders. Everybody's kind of resistant to this whole thing coming the pipe. Operationally, I understand that, but where there's resistance, I think we have a chance to really look at ways that we can solve for TRID. Now, I'm guessing that everybody that's sitting out there on this audience right now, sometimes since June of 2014, when the CFPB offered its first webinar, has possibly seen the slide that's on the screen in front of you right now. I think that version of what it takes to solve for TRID has really set itself as the icon for how complex this particular new regulatory challenge is going to be. And actually, after spending time reading the rule and attending every webinar I could, I've really concluded that solving for TRID really isn't rocket science at all. In fact, what we're going to do today is we're going to try to prove a hypothesis. We're going to try to prove a hypothesis that TRID can be used as a catalyst for us in the origination side of things to produce business. So for any of those of you in the group that were expecting a slideshow with loan estimates and closing disclosures and little red circles and arrows pointing to what information goes where, what lenders can do or can't do, and how the CFPB is going to affect them, any cute little calendars that count general business days, specific business days, or calendar days, you may be a little bit disappointed. But I think if you take off your operations hat, if you take off your regulatory hat, and you put on your revenue generating hat, I'm hoping that in the next few minutes, with an open mind, I'll actually be able to show you how you can leverage TRID to increase the strength of your relationships and to get things done in a way that, while TRID will never be a fun tool, actually, and I'm not embarrassed to say this publicly, I think it's an obstructive tool, but you can use its introduction to your benefit to help your clients. And that's what I want to try to go through here today. So if you're open-minded enough to give me a chance to do that, then hopefully you'll walk away with some thoughts that maybe are new. And if I can give you one aha, I'm hoping that will make this 45 minutes of your day worthwhile, because that your time is the only thing that you have only 1,440 minutes a day of. So I like to be respectful of your time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this thing and I'm going to try to prove a hypothesis. Now, before I prove the hypothesis or tell you what that hypothesis is, let's do a little background so I can establish where the hypothesis comes from. And that is that successful closes result from teams that operate as an integrated whole. It starts with buyers and sellers, because we're going to focus on purchase transactions in this for the next 30 minutes. We're not going to talk about refinances because they're not as affected by TRID as purchases are. And frankly, the idea behind this presentation is to get you focused on how you can convince your real estate partners and your prospective real estate partners why you're the go-to person in solving this TRID problem for them. So we know that in every transaction we're going to be dealing with, there's going to be a buyer and seller because we're isolating to that group. And I think that everybody would agree that a successful close is made up of no surprises and closing on time. I asked the audience of real estate guys on October 5th what their top 2 or 3 items were, and to a person, they all included, we don't want surprises and we want to get this thing closed on time in their top 3 or 4 responses. And what we have to have is successful teamwork. Once the buyer and seller have decided to start the transaction, once the buyer and seller have related themselves to one of their agents, obviously the next thing that has to be brought to the party is a funding source. Because when it's all said and done, there just aren't that many cash deals that happen out there, and we have to have us, the originators and our lenders, in the fray in order for these deals to go through. Then finally, the team is assembled by finding a place to close the deal. We have a title company. In some states we have attorneys. In some states we have escrows. But in one form or another, there is a closing participant, and we've developed the members of a team. But the fact of life is, this is just assembling people to get something done. In order to establish and prove the hypothesis that I'm going to present to you here in a couple of minutes, we've got to get this team to act like a single unit. Now, I don't know about all of you, but frankly, and I shared this with the folks in Denver earlier in the month, my experience is when I'm sitting in a closing room, and I go to all my closings, when I'm going through the process of originating on a purchase, I really often get the sense that it's an us and them environment. You know, we're all just running straight forward, trying to get our slice of the action complete. And it's really not a team. It's just a collection of people doing their narrow piece of the work that ends up with funds at a closing table and keys exchanging hands in a purchase. And when it's all said and done, what TRID does is allows us the opportunity to focus on the need to create a single integrated unit and actually function as a team and not as individuals. And so that's really what I'm hoping that we're going to get everybody on the call to see as a value proposition that you can relay to the other members of the extended team that act like individuals today instead of a team. So when it's all said and done, a successful close really succeeds because the team works as a unit. And by working as a unit, you can actually make a lot of things happen that today are more difficult. It doesn't make the work go away, it just makes the work a little bit easier. And really, when you think about TRID and its effect on what we're looking at here, TRID really doesn't get in the way of what it takes for the team to produce success. What TRID really does is only one thing. It focuses us, it focuses us on the need to work as a single unit and not as a collection of people. And if we're going to become and operate as a unit, it really requires 3 very simple things as a standalone set of items. We must, as a team, set expectations. We must collaborate with one another and our buyers and sellers. And more than ever before, TRID has created the need for us to communicate early, often, results-oriented, and about relevant information. So if we look at what we've just set as the background for my hypothesis, let's take a look. I showed you this slide. I showed you how complex the chalkboard is, but the pure fact of life is I don't think it's as hard as that blackboard would make us think it is. So let's erase that information. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my hypothesis, and then we're going to go through and see if I can prove the hypothesis in a way that it will give you a tool that you can move forward with and create lemonade out of this lemon that is TRID. My hypothesis is pretty straightforward. C2P yields an increase in SC. Sorry about the math, but you can't prove a hypothesis without using a little bit of math. C2P is a change in perspectives and paradigms, yours. And you can extend that to your buyers or to the real estate agents that represent your buyers and your sellers. I would argue you can extend the change in perspective and paradigm to your lenders, and you can become a catalyst to helping lenders change their perspective and paradigm, and to the title companies as well. And the SC is successful closings. So simply stated, if we can change our perspectives and paradigms as a result of what TRID has thrown at us, we can end up with more successful closings and with additional relationships where we've differentiated ourselves as the professionals that are going to help our real estate partners move through this transition without all the pain that everybody is predicting. And the way I want to prove this is to jump on about 7 myths that I think exist about TRID and give you some facts about them and move on from there with a fact-based, maybe change in mindset. You will not leave this 45-minute session thinking that TRID is helpful, unless you already do. And if you do, I'd love to hear from you to help me figure out how it's helpful later. But what you will walk away with, I hope, is a perspective that will allow you to work with TRID for the benefit of your business and for the benefit of your real estate connections. So let's focus on the myths and realities of TRID. And the first myth that I'm usually faced with or have been faced with is that we can't do pre-quals and we can't do pre-approvals. And the fact is that that's just not true. I know a lot of people, a lot of lenders are talking about the fact that you can't require documentation, you can't ask for stuff before you have intent to proceed, a variety of things. But the pure fact of life is that what we did with pre-qualifications and pre-approvals before October 2nd hasn't really changed. In fact, for those of you who may have spent some time with the webinars, on May the 26th this year, a gentleman named Prego de Oliveira, who's an attorney at the CFPB, presented a Q&A session webinar. It was their 5th and final webinar pre-TRID. And during his portion of the presentation, he actually talked about pre-quals and pre-approvals and actually left, I thought, the audience with more questions than he answered. I had a discussion with Prego about a week ago. Unfortunately, I spent too much time talking with the CFPB, but Prego and I discussed the idea of pre-quals, pre-approvals, specifically in the context of whether or not, as an originator, I can require my borrower to provide me with documentation to be verified before I issue a pre-approval, which is generally what we want to be able to do. And Prego was quick to state very affirmatively, regardless of what you're, that if you don't have all 6 elements, and obviously in pre-quals and pre-approvals we often don't have the address, you're free to ask for documentation all the way up until you have all 6 elements that constitute an application. I'm not going to bore you with a repeat of the acronym ALIENS for the 6 things that constitute an application. But the fact is, no matter what anybody's telling you, if you don't have one of those 6 elements, you can request information if you want to do pre-approvals. However, in the sense of proving my hypothesis, what I've suggested to the real estate group I was talking to, and I will suggest to you, use TRID as an opportunity to work on eroding the existing paradigm. Pre-approvals and pre-quals aren't worth the paper they're written on. We all know that. At best, they tell us a little bit about the creditworthiness of the consumer, but they can't really pre-approve or pre-qualify them for the purchase that they're anticipating. What we need to do is to present ourselves as the expert and get our real estate folks, both on the buying and selling side, to recognize that working with us is better than having a piece of paper that doesn't mean anything. And I suggest that that's what we share with our real estate guys when we're talking to them about why we're different than other people that they're going to have a chance to work with. When we bring them somebody, we will have vetted them to the best of our ability. And because we're working as an extended but integrated team, we're going to develop relationships that serve better than an individual pre-approval letter to convince a buyer's agent or a seller's agent, a listing agent, that they can convey to their customer that we're working with a team that will get it done. You don't have to worry about pre-approvals and pre-quals. It would be so great, in my mind, if we could get away from the idea that this piece of paper has any more meaning than what it does, which is very little. The second myth is that closing is going to take 45 days or longer. That actually started, I guess, with NAR. NAR did a big video and said, hey, you guys got to get ready. You ought to plan 45 days to closing. Well, I tell you what, if you've looked at TRID closely, you know the same thing I know. TRID didn't extend our closing at all unless we want to let it do that. The pure fact of life is that our front end is the same today as it was 25 days ago when TRID took effect on Saturday, the 3rd of October. The only thing that's changed is the form of the disclosures and the fact that we've got to get those disclosures to people with more scrutiny today than it was on October 2nd. The actual operational requirements that align with TRID are really no different than the operational considerations that align with the old GFE process that we went through starting back in January of 2010. We can acquiesce to the industry saying it's going to take longer. We can all pull our hair out worrying about the 3-day pre-consummation requirement that TRID has for the closing disclosure. We can all fall prey to the misrepresentations of some of the attorneys that used to work at CFPB that are now hawking the details of how TRID works, and we can fall into the black hole concerns that, by the way, I clarified with the senior legal counsel at the CFPB about a month ago, that in fact you can make changes to the closing disclosure in spite of what folks like Ben Olson and Richard Horn may say. There are conditions where you can change the closing disclosure. And I'm not going to go into a lot of the technical stuff, but there's just so many misrepresentations about what's reality. The fact is that there is no TRID-based reason why your closings can't happen as quickly as they were going to happen before. What it does imply is that you as the originator need to take the lead. You as the originator need to show that you're the expert, and that with collaboration and with communication and by properly setting expectations, you can make this thing happen just like it did before, just with new paper. Now, is it going to be tough for the first 6 months? Yeah. We're all going to have to deal with lender issues. We're all going to have to deal with the stuff that's out there that everybody believes is in their way. But that doesn't mean anything to you as an originator or to me as an originator, except it's an opportunity for me to show how to get it done right, and that I'm the right go-to person to make that happen. Myth number 3, and I would guess by this point in time, everybody on the call knows that closings will not be delayed for every little mistake. Everybody at this point in time is probably already aware there are only 3 things that kick the 3-day clock in place. And that is if your APR goes up by more than an 8, if there's a change in the loan product, or the introduction of a prepayment penalty. So beyond that, there's no reason to think that you've got to expect delays in closing. Will there be delays at the table when you're going to get funding approval for a disbursement? I suspect there will be, and I suspect there will be delays that none of us can prevent for the first 6 months. But what we can do is work with our real estate professionals and set their expectations. Know that we're there and we'll be holding their hand and we'll be holding the lender's hand. Make yourself as an originator that is a broker indispensable by saying, hey, look, I know that you need somebody to help you work with the lenders, because we go to myth number 4, that lenders will totally control the process. And you as an originator that knows what you're doing and is working with your real estate pros can mitigate this one. But the pure fact of life is TRID didn't cause this. Lenders have controlled the process on everything but cash transactions since mortgages started. There's no real difference here. Operationally, yeah, there's a little bit of difference in the fact that lenders are now on the hook for loan estimates, so they're going to make your life miserable by telling you, no, you don't have 3 days. You have somewhere between 1 day and 36 hours to get us an upload so that we can produce CLE, because we're not going to allow you to do it. There's going to be problems with the closing disclosure and the title company, because the lenders are going to want to have a lot of control over that process because they're on the hook downstream for everything. But the fact of life is, all that does is modify the importance of you being the professional, results-oriented originator that you are, and to use that to get your community of real estate professionals to want to lean on you, because they know that you can hold the lender's hand through the process and communicate with the real estate agent and with the buyers and sellers through them in a way that will make this as easy as you can make this kind of major transition. Myth number 5 that I hear a lot of times is that TRID is going to change the processes in ways that are going to prevent me from knowing what's going on. Now, recognize that the me in this slide is the real estate agent. And I suspect if I were able to poll all 30 plus of you that are out there now, that about what real estate agents know about this, many of you would come back and say they're pretty much in the dark. They all believe it's going to be the worst thing that's ever happened. They all believe that they're going to have delayed closings, and they all believe that they're not going to know what's going on. At the end of the day, the TRID process itself, again, doesn't make things any harder or any easier. The TRID process simply changes several forms that we've been used to using. We all made the transition from the old good faith estimate pre-January 2010. We made it to the new good faith estimate. We'll be able to make the transition from the good faith estimate to the loan estimate just as quickly probably as we did the old one. And at the end of the day, the idea of not knowing what's going on is a communication-based issue, not a TRID-based issue. So I've got another example of where you, as an informed originator, with a plan for how you're going to do it, can actually help your real estate community stay in touch with the entire transaction, and you'll be able to get things done in spite of everybody's concerns and their resistance to TRID. So with a properly functioning extended team working as an integrated unit, and I know I'm repeating myself, but that's really how important the team concept is. With that in place, with work that's associated with setting expectations, collaborating, and communicating, you can overcome what is not a reality. You can overcome the myth that TRID is going to change processes in ways where the real estate agents don't know what's going on. You can be the cure for that particular disease. Stacked closings is probably one, that may be the top discussion item that I hear about in the real estate community. The pure fact of life is that stacked closings are hard on October 2nd. Stacked closings have never been very easy to do, and stacked closing problems are more often not related to process as much as they are to setting expectations and to communicating. The pure fact of life is that whether TRID's in place or we're back in the old days of the good faith estimate and the TIL and a HUD-1, when it's all said and done, stacked closings can be managed. There's no reason to do like NAR did and tell people you've got to avoid stacked closings. What you need to do is to communicate and make sure if you're representing the buyer may have an agent, they may not, they probably do. Make sure that the buyer and the buyer's agent are communicating downstream, because more often than not, you're going to have a majority of your buyers are also sellers. Well, there's a link there that the real estate broker, if you help guide them, can create a communication process with the agent representing the buyer when they're selling the deal. Flip that coin and talk about the seller. The sellers probably, even more often than the buyers being sellers, the sellers are going to become buyers. And that means they've got a relationship with somebody on that next transaction. All we have to do is be thoughtful at the outside when we know, at the outset, sorry about that, that we know when we've got this transaction coming on board that's a purchase, we need to make sure we ask the questions that set up the links that tie in the ability to communicate with the extended pieces that are going to happen. If we're communicating that way and we're sending status reports to people, we can manage stacked closings as well as they can conceivably be managed. Of course, we want everybody to try to press to get sellers to have a little bit of room between when they have to get out of the house. You know, it's usually the seller side that gets stumbled on when these kind of things fail. We do want to set those expectations, but what we want to do as professionals is to let our team know if you find yourself in a situation where you have to have a same-day stacked closing, we are the game, we're the guys to come to, because we, better than any, can get it done. Another opportunity to differentiate yourself and to show that you're the right person to come to help get these things done. And myth number 7 is that TRID's going to make our job harder than it is today being October 2nd. You know, the fact is, when it's all said and done, the transfer of ownership of the largest asset that most people have, it is a tough transaction any way you cut it, whether we're dealing pre-TRID or post-TRID. The fact is, TRID has really done nothing to make the work any harder at all. It's no different than in January of 2010 when we had to adapt to the new GFE from the old one-page GFE that's now our fee worksheet. It's really no different than April of 2011 when our entire industry had to deal with different ways to compensate ourselves. Will TRID make the job any easier? No, it won't. But the important consideration is that TRID doesn't make it harder. What TRID does is gives every one of us an opportunity to leverage our professionalism and to communicate to people we already work with and to communicate to people that we'd like to work with that we are experts with regard to TRID and that we can make their life the easiest it can be in closing this massively complex transactions. You have the opportunity to set expectations. You have the opportunity to drive the collaboration, and you have the opportunity to communicate. Now, when you do all those things, you actually will end up closing deals more successfully. So we set out to prove something, that if we changed paradigms and perspectives, we could increase successful closings. And I think if you look at the myths, we actually have addressed how to overcome those myths. And we've also talked about the facts behind the myths, but how to overcome the real estate agents' concerns about those myths simply by becoming a team and doing the work that an integrated team does: expectations, collaboration, and communication. We can establish the pre-quals by setting their expectations about a pre-qual. Change the paradigm. 45-day closes, it's just not a fact. If you set the expectations, if you collaborate, and if you communicate as a team, you're going to meet closings just as fast today as you did before TRID. Closing day delays, all you have to do is put out the real information. There are only 3 things that bump a closing by 3 days. And those 3 things just are not going to happen that close to closing to begin with. Lenders controlling the process, this is a tremendous place for you to differentiate yourself just through communication. Let your team know you manage the lender. You've got them under control. You will keep them in touch. The awareness, the idea that people don't know what's going on, that's totally on you. You can collaborate and communicate that out of existence. Everybody can know exactly what's happening. On the stacked closings, same thing. If you can set the expectation that you want to try to avoid same-day repeated closings if you can, but if you can't, you're the guy. You're going to establish the communication links by teaching the selling agents and buying agents, here's how you need to reach out and find out what's going on the outside ends of your transaction, and then you as a team, as an integrated unit, can manage it. And that the work will be harder. The fact is, I truly believe if you can internalize the idea of creating an integrated unit and really focusing on setting expectations, collaboration, and communication, the work is not going to be harder. You're actually going to find you're going to increase revenue, and you're going to increase partnerships, and you're going to end up with work that is more productive. It might not be easier, but it will be more productive. So when it's all said and done, changing the paradigm, changing perspective will drive more successful closings. It's not going to be easier, but it will be something that we'll feel good about because we know that we're teaching a community how to get it done in spite of what appears to be a barrier. And in fact, I'm going to wrap this up with a couple of minutes. I'm going to actually give you a look at a tool that I became aware of through a subscriber to my MLO compliance program. It's a tool that allows you to communicate with your real estate professionals. And actually, now that we're a couple of weeks into this thing, I think it may be a little bit more valuable than it was before TRID. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes on this just so you can get an idea of what it is, and I'll come back and we'll wrap this thing up.
What if there was a way for you to take all of the changes that are coming in October with the implementation of TRID and use those changes to get more realtor business? What if I was able to show you why there is an opportunity right now to use the rollout of TRID to create realtor conversations, to get realtor sit-downs and meetings, and ultimately to cement yourself as the go-to lender and earn more referrals? And I was able to lead you step by step in exactly how you can do it. Simply give me a few minutes of your time, and in this video, I'll do just that. Here's the deal. TRID has created an opportunity that we normally don't have as loan originators. It's the opportunity to soothe the concerns of realtors who have been fed a bunch of misinformation and are now one step below panic, and to build credibility with them while earning their trust. I'm sure you already know that people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And I'm also sure you know how hard it is to build that kind of relationship with a potential real estate agent partner. With the rollout of TRID, agents have been spooked. They've been warned that their transaction times are going to increase by as much as 15 days. They've been told that they'll no longer be able to do concurrent sell-buy transactions, where their buyer sells a home and buys a new one in the same day. They've even been told that they should do walkthroughs a week early, and I'm not quite sure how that's supposed to work. The point is that realtors are worried, frustrated, angry, and many of them are blaming the lenders. You see, many agents don't even know that it's the CFPB, a government agency, that has created and implemented TRID. Instead, many realtors think that these changes were brought about by lenders, and they think that these TRID changes are going to screw up their world big time, and they're blaming us. The reality, though, is that this isn't really true. TRID doesn't have to do any of those things, especially delay their closings. With a well-trained and prepared originator, an originator like you, they could be operating business as usual with very few or even no problems or delays.
So this particular tool was, as I mentioned, was offered to me for review by one of my subscribers who uses it. What it does is it puts together a complete campaign program that allows you to reach out to real estate agents that you work with, real estate agents that you'd like to work with, and give them a package that provides them with English-based explanations of TRID and presents it as information coming from you. I have no vested interest in any of that toolkit at all, but I thought, since I knew it was out there and since I know subscribers that are using it, it might be something you'd be interested in. When this is all done, I'll be sending out an email to everybody on the webinar. I'll include a link. If you're interested in it, take a look. If not, that's just fine. But I thought it was a really, really slick way to create a private labeled program that can show your real estate community the basic difference between working with you to overcome this new obstacle versus just out there flailing in the wind. So with all of that, David, I'm done with my side of the presentation. I'd be happy to entertain any questions. I don't know if that would be done just by chat or if there are any questions out there. Just let me know. I'd like to thank everybody for allowing me to take this time and spend it with you. I hope you found this a useful 45 minutes or so.
Thank you, Bill. Yes, very useful. We do have a few questions. The first one is the one that's on most people's minds is when will the slides be sent? We are taking the slides and we're going to send them out by tomorrow afternoon. And that kind of goes into the second question. Bill, it's couched under the umbrella of where do I start with a real estate agent? And I think what this person is asking is, are you recommending, like, do you do a lunch and learn? Do you take the PDF or take the slides and explain TRID to real estate agents? Where do you recommend that they start on like a first meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I think that to me is now and has always been, whether it's TRID or not, how you start either building on or developing a new relationship is very personal. And I think, you look at your comfort zone and you look at where you'd rather, where you're most comfortable. Do you pick up the phone and say, hey, I found something that's really cool I thought you might like to know about? Do you send an email? Do you drop by an office? For me, my personal style on this particular thing is I just send an email to my existing real estate group, and if I've got some that I wanted to do business with but haven't been successful with, I send them a link to this slide, to that video that I just showed everybody. Mm-hmm. That video is oriented toward your real estate agent. And it is oriented as coming from you, so that the person doing the talking is you, and you're offering the real estate agent a complete program. It's also followed by follow-ups to anybody who clicks the link and comes in and wants to see the video. And the video is only a few minutes long for the real estate agent. I send out the email. Anybody who replies, obviously, I reply to by phone, and then we set up a meeting, and you can follow up by phone for anybody who doesn't call back. You can say, did you get it? I mean, I think it's just a matter of having a plan and doing some outbound, whether it's phone, face-to-face, or email.
I see. So you think they would have more luck if they kind of went individually? A follow-up to that would be, you kind of talked about being the authority on TRID and representing yourself as the authority on TRID. Do you think there's an opportunity for mortgage brokers maybe to speak at like a real estate agent gathering or like the meetups or anything? Do you think there's openness to that if they would come in?
I do. I mean, Yeah, I mean, if you've got, for example, in Colorado, we have 43 realtor associations that are a part of the Colorado Association of Realtors. We always encourage originators to attempt to get in front of the group. And there are within that stack that comes with that little program. And again, I'm not really trying to sell the program. It's just something that's out there. But within that stack, you can pull out information that's targeted directly to real estate guys, and you can even attack the myths. I mean, that's what I used. I went out to a mastermind group and presented these 7 myths, and the questions I got back all confirmed that these myths were reality in their minds. And so if you can get in front of a group, you know, that never hurts. The other thing you can do that I didn't highlight on here, if you want to help your real estate guys, the CFPB on the CFPB website has an entire section that's targeted at helping real estate agents become aware of TRID. I think it's overkill. I think it's way too complex. But since as originators, you probably really know your way around TRID by now, even if you don't think you do. You know it better than they do. And if you went out and visited the CFPB real estate site, real estate broker knowledge base that they've got, you could hand pick things that you might want to pull out and use to communicate to your real estate community and to reach out to people who aren't using you yet.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, well, we're going to wrap things up. Just to let everybody know, the email with the PowerPoint slides will be in your inbox by tomorrow afternoon. Meanwhile, if you want to get more information on Bill's compliance project, go to mlocompliance.com. And then also, if you want more information on Pipeline ROI's marketing and workflow solutions product, go to pipeline.roi.com. And or give us a call, and we'll be glad to talk with you. Bill, again, thank you for your time and your wisdom and helping us understand this complex subject and making it much more simple, and we can make this work. All right. Well, thank you everyone for your time, and look for the recording and your email in your inbox. Thank you, everyone.